Thank you for joining us for this live panel focusing on the importance of extending 5% VAT for the hospitality sector. I'm Cara, editor of the Staff Canteen, and I'll be putting questions to our panel, but you can also ask questions, just simply add them to the comments and we will try and get through as many as we can. Although the main discussion point is VAT, I've no doubt that we will also talk about an extension of business rates relief, furlough, government-backed loan repayment, the roadmap announcement on February 22nd, and obviously the budget on March the 3rd. So my guests today, thank you all very much for joining me. We've got Tom Kerridge, Kate Nicholls, Andy Lennox, Sacha Lord and Michael Kill. How are we all?
Very well, thank you.
Well, good.
All good, thanks, mate.
Good. So I'm going to go straight in. Andy, I'm going to come to you first. I organised this obviously because I saw the petition that you're doing. Why did you want to start that petition? You've got 15,000 signatures now, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I think ultimately it's just about using different levers. I mean, we've all been writing, I think everyone on this panel would probably written hundreds of letters to government and various different, MPs, etc. And like myself, and I think for me, it was about trying to find another lever to pull as well. Raising awareness publicly as well as just privately lobbying. It was off the back actually of a letter from Paul Scully, which I had, and it was basically there was saying, VAT probably not going to be extended. And it's not in the budget, and that was where the petition was started, really. So yeah, 15,000, I think, just over 7 days. The idea is basically just keep on growing it as much as possible, just to keep on raising awareness, really. And then obviously with everything else, writing letters, lobbying, speaking to all of our MPs, etc. So yeah, just trying to pull every lever, I think.
Yeah, and obviously I've got you all on this call because you all are very much behind that. But so why is the VAT extension so important? Kate, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think just to round off on that point about the petition, there's a lot of work that's been done that is communicating what it means to us as businesses and why it's so important for the businesses, why it's so important for repairing the economy. And I think the petition is a really good way to make sure that it's relevant and valid for our customers and our consumers, and also the people who work in the industry who don't often feel as though some of the letter writing campaigns are relevant to them. So, I'd encourage everybody who works in the industry to sign that petition to give a show and a signal of how important it is. And really, VAT, it was granted to us in July as a means of stimulating demand, helping to repair shattered balance sheets and to support the recovery. And we got it in July to be able to support that recovery. And the anticipation was that we would recover and we would get back towards normal levels of trading, not fully profitable, but normal levels of trading by the end of last year. And clearly with the hiatus that we've had, the disruption, it's even more important. All those arguments remain just as valid. If you want to make sure that businesses can pay down their debts, can start to rebuild their balance sheets, can support and sustain employment and bring people back, then the VAT cut is the quickest way of getting money into the businesses. And also after almost 5-6 months of really in and out yo-yos of restrictions, even longer if you're a business that's been in the Northwest and Leicester, where you haven't really had a chance to properly get open, it's going to take a long time to rebuild consumer confidence. People have had their plans changed. The worst thing we could do as we come out of lockdown is to put our prices up 15 percentage points. So in terms of giving that boost to customers and consumers that they can have a great time staying at home, doing a staycation in the UK, not doing foreign travel, it's something that gives them a little bit of a boost as well and makes it a better value for them.
Okay, and so anybody else want to jump in on that point about why it's so important to them and to the industry?
Yeah, for the industry point of view, it was something that was given, and I truly believe that when it was given, I think it was given in very good faith in terms of trying to regenerate growth and allow hospitality industry to build on, like Kate says, of shattered balance sheets that have all been completely disrupted. But sadly, the second and third lockdowns come along, and so it ends up just being words. They're just hot air. VAT is going to be 5%, but 5% of zero turnover is still zero. So, it's been no help at all, for a very short period of time, perhaps, but actually longevity, it needs to be there for securing future. And part of the part of the bigger reason is we all talk about hospitality jobs being lost and there's going to be loads and loads of closures. Now, we all know within the industry that this is something that's coming, but from everybody from the outside who isn't in the industry and just hears it in newspaper headlines or conversations or whenever any of us have been able to voice an opinion on any particular media platform, there hasn't been huge closures yet. There hasn't been lots of losses, and that's solely because that furlough scheme still exists, and people are that scaffolding of support systems that have been put there still exist. So most businesses care deeply about their staff. So no one's closing just yet. We're all taking hits. We're getting further and further and further into debt, because the staff at this point are still getting 80% of their pay. They're still getting, so you can't just close, because then all you're doing is just casting all your staff aside with no jobs to walk into because nowhere is open. So every business is getting deeper and deeper and deeper into debt at this minute, because those systems, those support systems are still there. And what will happen is the moment that we can reopen, the moment that those support systems start getting removed, that is when businesses will start closing, but they won't close straight away. It won't just be a sudden closure, because so many businesses would have taken that hit. They've still got the staff, they will open. But we all know that profit margins in hospitality businesses are very, very small. It's a very fine line. If you're making a 10% EBITDA, you know, everyone's going, okay, we're doing good. This is great. The moment you start taking, those percentages start dropping. And if we've all walked into huge amounts of debt, like we have in the last year, taking on more and more burden to repay that, that VAT isn't there. That isn't a 15% to give you profit. That 15% is there to help pay off many of those debts that are going to secure those jobs. And I feel that if businesses aren't able to operate at that percentage, those percentage profit margins, it's going to be a slow death. It's going to be lots of businesses slowly closing because they can't keep up with those debt repayments. So that 15% VAT is most definitely something that should be extended till at least the end of the year, to give many businesses that helping start. And we're not talking about this isn't a massive boost. This is just helping people get back on the road to recovery, to ensure that those jobs are still in existence. And if many places do have to close, the operators who can still operate as a profit have the position to offer employment to the people that have already lost their jobs. It's one of those. It's a life support machine. It's something that to keep it going and give it that interest and give it that boost to the economy as we begin to come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, obviously you're mentioning rebuilding and, you know, obviously trying to come out of it. Sacha, what are your thoughts on this? You know, with everything that Tom said and Kate's already mentioned, what are you thinking in terms of what will the government do? Are they going to listen?
Are they going to listen? Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that, because I'll just like scream. But, you know, I agree with everything that Andy, Kate, Tom said. But, you know, not just looking at hospitality, you know, but my business, as well as advising Mayor Andy Burnham, my business is music festivals, you know, dance events. We were the very, very first ones to close. There have been no festivals. So it does feel like a bit of a token gesture to us. You know, at the moment, I know in 22, all the tours have been pushed into 22. You know, the larger venues like Manchester Arena is normally busy on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next year, it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right the way through. And that 15% is going to make such a humongous difference once you throw in the Brexit thing into it as well. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty about touring coming in. You know, even when I had the Chemical Brothers on at Park Life, you know, they were a British band, but we had 10 massive Arctic lorries that brought the production in. If they're doing a tour around Europe now, there's so much nervousness about it, whether they're going to be stuck at boards and things like that. So, you know, there are a lot of factors. VAT is one of them. I think Andy or Kate mentioned it before, you know, business rates, another one. I think furlough should be extended until we can operate fully at 100%. And I was saying to Kate before we came on, for me, it does feel like we're getting almost positive conversations for once. It feels like, I think if it was down to the scientists, we'd all be locked up indoors for the next 2 years. And I think now they're starting to lock heads and realise actually the economy is teetering on the edge here. We need to do something. And, you know, the 2 dates that are coming up now are absolutely critical and probably the most important dates that I can remember in my lifetime for hospitality. That's the 22nd of Feb, where we hope that the Prime Minister does actually give us firm timeline with actual specific dates. And then the Chancellor on the 3rd of March. You know, these 2 weeks are absolutely key. They really are. Yeah,
I mean, and we'll come back to those 2 dates specifically in a minute. Michael, I just want to bring you in as well. And I read that you said that you know, we're talking about debt and people what we're accumulating just from standing still. And you said that 88% of nightclub businesses are over 2 quarters of rent in arrears, correct?
That's right. I mean, the commercial rent situation is horrendous for people. I mean, I'm getting, and I'm sure Kate will reiterate this because we've had conversations outside, but this continuous barrage by landlords who are in a very similar situation, don't get me wrong, are putting pressure on tenants and people where they're overburdened with debt as a whole. You know, they're making decisions to step out of the industry, and particularly the businesses like nightclubs, and there are many other businesses like it, but particularly nightclubs and the event sector who have been in this since March and have supported the public health strategy and campaign have had to really consider their position. Are they going to be able to get out of that debt? And this 5% VAT position is one part of a bigger picture that needs to be delivered by the Chancellor on the 3rd. And it needs to be something which is about rescue and regeneration, not about recuperation. And our big concern is the budget needs to be about long-term recovery, particularly for our sector. And it's work that we have put, tirelessly in. I know Sacha and everyone on this call have really added to the campaign to ensure that the voice is being heard. But there is still this anticipation that the 22nd is not going to give us clearer picture as we would like. We've asked for dates. We've asked for the narrative to be inclusive. And to include as many of the businesses and understanding of which business is going to be able to come forward, where to open. But the other piece is to make sure that this budget is fit for purpose. There's no point in putting something in that's just going to draw money back to the government, because you're going to see more and more businesses fail. The 5% VAT position is vitally important for long-term regeneration and rescue of many of these businesses that have been beleaguered and are hugely overburdened with debt at the moment, particularly the late night sector which we represent.
Sorry, can I just throw into that? Sorry for interrupting. Can I just throw into that? Because I think this is really important. When non-essential retail starts to reopen again, and by the way, I think hospitality should open at exactly the same time as non-essential retail. It's far safer to go for lunch in Tom's restaurants, Bull and Bear in Manchester, than it is to swerve in and out of the Arndale Centre in Manchester. That's for sure. But, when we do return to the high streets, we've no longer got Topman, Topshop, Miss Selfridges, Dorothy Perkins, Debenhams, Wallace's, Burton's. They've all disappeared. They've gone. And COVID hasn't killed them off because they were dying businesses anyway, but COVID has most definitely expedited that. So we've now got these large vacuumless spaces on the high streets. Hospitality is one of the only sectors that can fill those spaces. If you think about large restaurants, bars, live music venues, cinemas, boutique hotels. Now, I think that's why we need to protect hospitality now more than ever, because we can help those high streets to evolve rather than die, and they could die. I think those brands that I've just mentioned to you now, that's just the start of it. I understand why people are going to trade online. It makes absolute sense. You don't have all the huge overheads. So as people's buying patterns change, our industry could be the one that rescues the high street.
And are we all in agreement that you'd like to see hospitality open at the same time as non-essential shops?
If you can open H&M safely, you can open the V&A, and if you can open Primark, then you can certainly open Tom's restaurants, Andy's restaurants, any of those big safe spaces. It's all about standards, and it's all about risk assessment. And actually what we need to make sure is that we level up to our standards, because we operate at the most COVID secure protocols in the world. They are the toughest restrictions. It does cap what we're able to earn, so we do need to work a way of tapering that off and eliminating them at some point, but they are the toughest in the world and they are safe. And we know that over the course of July and August, we had 60 million customer visits a week to hospitality, no increase in infection levels during that time, and fewer than 3% of cases attributable to hospitality. So, that's how we should be approaching it. It's not about what type of premises you are. It's about behaviours, it's about risk mitigation, it's about health and safety. And it's what we do fundamentally in hospitality. We deal with people who are in a difficult or strange situation, who maybe need protecting from themselves. We regulate behavior, we manage difficult substances, and we keep people safe. That's what we do in a day-to-day basis. And on top of all of that, we give them a fantastic everyday experience. And that's what everybody is crying out for at the moment. It's a little bit of hope, a little bit of a hug in an everyday experience.
I also think that non-essential retail will be, they will want hospitality to be open at the same point where Kate talks about experience there. You know, like Sacha said, you can order everything online, that's absolutely fine. But what retail now has to give it is a retail experience. You have to enjoy being out there, you have to enjoy being in the shops, being amongst friends and family and people. That whole experience of shopping is something that retail desperately needs to cling on to be able to survive in this current situation that they find themselves in moving forward, and to work hand in hand in that. The partnership is hospitality. Going for a coffee, picking up a panini sandwich, or going out for lunch somewhere really nice, they're all part of being out and about and shopping. So non-essential retail, in order to get people out there to be able to help those shops survive, they also need the added reason of people going for coffees, cappuccinos, getting themselves a really nice sandwich, or going for a really lovely lunch at the Bull and Bear or wherever it may be. You know, they need hospitality to be a part of their existence and their growth project.
And also there's a key point there as well, which we saw in July when non-essential retail opened earlier than we did. I mean, dwell time and spend all go up if you've got hospitality as a complimentary offer. We know that from places like the Trafford Centre or Westfield. But equally, if you don't have those support places around, you have crowds of people in the public realm who nobody is managing because they've got nowhere to go and they've got no facilities. Yeah. So we need to make sure, particularly places like Bournemouth, you had people packed on beaches and packed in parks and no public conveniences and loos, no car parking. It helps to manage the whole social distancing situation if you can open up our facilities and make sure people can do things safely.
Yeah, I mean, down in Bournemouth, it was a disaster from start to finish. I mean, you're sitting there going, you know, as an industry, hospitality helps regulate as well. I mean, we can help people safe. And, you know, you had the whole Bournemouth beach, hundreds of thousands of people on the beach, no toilets, no restaurants, no bars, nothing. And you didn't have the extra security from those restaurants as well and those bars. And I think if you don't open us together, it will be a disaster again. And I think we just need to learn from our mistakes. And that's what frustrates me the most, is that we don't seem to be learning from our mistakes. We're not listening still. Government is not listening still. You know, we've got to basically open together with a plan. And I think this is why the 22nd is so key. You know, we have to have a roadmap. We have to know what we're doing. If it's May, it's May. Fine, tell us it's May. And that's the really key part for me as well.
I think the other thing is just we're probably the most regulated spaces on the high street in terms of policing, EHO, health. I mean, you know, how could you even consider us not fulfilling? I mean, people have invested, you know, between 10 and 30 grand a venue, some of them, just making COVID safe environments. So they've committed cash reserves to it. You know, we're sat there being regulated by police, local authorities, you know, EHO. People are on top of us constantly. You cannot step out of line easily without being sort of brought to bear. So the reality is the comparative between non-essential retail and what we do is very, very different. And Kate is right. There needs to be a level stepped up. But the challenge that we have is just getting that through. They keep coming back to customer behavior, which is, you know, it's a challenge for everyone, whether you're in retail or not. But without a doubt, agree that we need to open at the same time as the retail sector, and our contribution is hugely important to the high street.
What are your thoughts on the 5% VAT being extended to alcohol?
I think it's hugely important. I think it feels like it's almost like a class war. It's felt like, you know, if you can afford to eat out, then you can afford to have a glass of wine or as much as you want. But if you can't, if it's not about that, it's completely, it's like the people who've made these rules up and haven't thought of, one, how important pubs are. They just assume, again, it comes back to that conversation about scientists, and every opportunity that I've had to speak to scientists or be a part of a roundtable conversation or something like this, it always feels that the scientist involved always assumes that every pub is the same as a city centre super pub, where, you know, it's packed on a Saturday night and there's a huge amount of people like doing everything to excess, and it's not. The majority of pubs are beating heartbeats of communities and centres of people's, they're the social meeting spaces, they're the places where people just get to their living rooms. People, you know, people live in tiny little high-rise flats or shared houses, and it's the opportunity to be able to do something in a safe environment. And if you do come from somewhere that's a little bit more economically challenged, and the opportunity, you can only have a drink with your friends or family if you're having something to eat. I find it, it's just unbelievable to think that, you know, we all know that alcohol affects people's thinking, what they do, but that doesn't mean to say that it's affecting people to that point all the time. You know, it's so, feels very, very nanny state, and it feels almost like a class war, I have to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tom on this. You know, this is one of my major bugbears. So in Greater Manchester alone, there are 1,806 wet-led pubs that don't serve food. The vast majority of those pubs are in our most deprived areas. And when they were shut, there was a pub called the Shiredale in an area called Harper Hay that is one of our most deprived villages. And they were closing, and I phoned up the landlady and had a long conversation with her. And she was saying to me, look, her and her husband, they probably pull £250 a week profit out of it. That's what they live on. But actually, for them, they serve more than a pint. They serve the community. You know, the vast majority of her customers were elderly people who lost their loved ones, not due to COVID. You know, they were just old people, and they'd get up every day. You know, they'd have the wash, they'd have the lunch, and then go in to sit and nurse a pint for 2 hours while seeing their friends. That's what they live for. So Tom's right. You know, when Greater Manchester was in Tier 2, which seems like a decade ago, let's, you know, I'll wear my Manchester shirt for a second, although it will be red. You know, we have had the hardest, longest, toughest restrictions in the whole of the UK, alongside Leicester. They always have a go for saying that. But, you know, we have. And when we're in Tier 2, why is it right that I can go into my local village, have lunch, have a few drinks, see social activity, or at the same time, the people that live in our most deprived areas, the lowest paid, they can't. And that is wrong. It's not right. And, you know, I sincerely hope that coming out of this in the next 2 weeks, that point is addressed.
I think that's right. I mean, I agree with everything that Sacha and Thomas said. I mean, the idea that you have to have a substantial table meal, or you have to be eating in order to get a drink and to sit and socialise with somebody. But you could sit at the theatre and have a drink without a social meal, or you could sit at the darts, or you could go to the football and have a drink. I just think it sort of erodes our culture, and it is sort of, it's difficult to see it as anything other than an attack on pubs. And they are at the heart of our communities. And I think that translates through as well to the VAT point, which I think you were asking about, which should that lower rate of VAT apply to alcohol sales too? Absolutely. It's the same principle of using that VAT to get support to the businesses that need it the most, that give a consumer incentive. So we should be extending it as much as we can to be able to give that support to hospitality. Hospitality has struggled throughout this. It's been hardest hit, and it's been badly served by the fact that we've had whole economy solutions which have helped everybody and haven't prioritised the hardest hit. Coming out of this, we need not only a commitment that we're never going into lockdown again and we're not having hospitality specific restrictions, but we need sector specific support to make sure that the sector that is going to deliver jobs, growth and investment at pace in the quickest possible way in all parts of the country, and in particular in the most deprived areas, and picking up the most disadvantaged young people who have been really severely affected by the pandemic. We need to have that VAT cut there to sustain and maintain that.
Picking up on obviously support, I'm just going to ask a question that has come in on Facebook. And would the panel like to see another Eat Out to Help Out scheme this summer? Because it did receive quite a lot of backlash after it was it brought into place, wasn't it?
The Eat Out to Help Out scheme was a really good scheme. People forget that what it was designed to do was to drive consumer confidence and get people back out into high streets, into living their lives generally, after a period which was very foreign to us then, all too familiar now, of being stuck at home for 3 months and being fully in lockdown. I'm not sure we'll necessarily need that same point about, you know, physically enticing people out, but that's what it was designed to do, was to get people back confident on the high street, because after opening non-essential retail 3 weeks early, they found they didn't have the footfall numbers, and so that was part of it. And also to help our industry, and it helped to bring back 1 million people from furlough. It helped to give a boost and bring forward and accelerate our recovery, probably by a couple of weeks, if you look at the trajectory of numbers in terms of take. It did not have any effect on infection numbers. It did not have any effect on problems. It didn't cause outbreaks because we had capacity constraints, we had occupancy caps, we had all our social distancing. And so you went through Eat Out to Help Out. There's no correlation between Eat Out to Help Out and any outbreaks that you've got anywhere in the country. So, you know, so it was a useful scheme. I'm not sure the situation is right to just bring it back as it was. I think we need different levers, we need different drivers, and certainly the businesses are in a totally different space. And the priority now, if we're looking at limited resources, has to be about getting cash to those businesses that are about to go bust. And I don't think we ought to underplay that. We have only 1 in 5 of our hospitality businesses, including the largest national chains in hotels, pubs, bars, restaurants. Only 1 in 5 businesses have enough cash to get through to the budget. They all run out of cash before that. Now, they will find ways of getting equity. They will be able to take on more debt, but it's the worst possible time to do it. But we have got businesses that are staring going bust in the face. And without that support that comes through, we need to make sure that they are protected, and that support needs to be prioritised there.
And I have to agree with Kate as well on Eat Out to Help Out. I thought it was an amazing thing to happen. I think the only caveat on that was just potentially the wrong month. You know, the wrong month. I mean, for me, we did a big campaign around spreading the week. So for me, the Eat Out to Help Out being on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was just a phenomenal thing to happen, and it really changed how consumers, all they were coming out, but it also changed them to thinking, oh, actually, you can go out on Monday and the Tuesday and Wednesday. So for me, I think it was a brilliant campaign to do, and I think actually the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday piece was fantastic. The big caveat and the big thing that I've had from the vast majority of people down here, especially, you know, the Cornwall kind of Bournemouth kind of south coast, you know, we're busy in the summer, and so basically August kind of, a lot of people started to say, well, actually, you know, we can't take any more people, and Eat Out to Help Out actually kind of overloaded the system a little bit. So I think, you know, if we're going to bring it back, it just needs to be in the right month. But the spread the week piece was, for me, actually the biggest part. That pushing people to start to say, go out on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It became like Thursday became the new Monday. And it kind of went from like, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, you had Saturday kind of sales, and then Thursday was like Monday, and then you had your normal kind of weekend. And it was just brilliant to have spread that week. So I really liked Eat Out to Help Out. I've kind of called for it to come back. I think it should come back, but it just needs to be in the right month and at the right time.
Andy, knowing you just mentioned Cornwall there, knowing that we know Matt Hancock's going on a holiday in Cornwall, if he does book in one of your restaurants, can I volunteer to work in the kitchen on that particular evening?
Done. Absolutely.
It's
going down to Cornwall, and you've got the G8, the G7 as well. I mean, Cornwall would be an absolute, you know, hot, you know, and yeah, definitely do it.
Thank you. But you know, we talk about footfall, and how Kate mentioned the footfall wasn't there for 3 weeks. I'm predicting, as I know others are as well on this call, that when we do return to normality, the hardest job is going to be our city centres. You know, the bigger the city centre, the harder it's going to be to recover. Very confident about that. And it's because public behaviour has changed. You know, my fiance works for one of the biggest, I've had a go at online companies, but she works for one of the biggest online companies in the UK, the second biggest one. She's been told categorically they will never return back to normal. Now it's going to be 3 days in the office, 2 days working from home. So people have got used to now working from home. People have got used to staying locally. So I think, you know, people are going to remain within this 15-minute distance from their home. So we need to get public back into the city centre. You know, I was in London before we went into full lockdown, and I was in shock actually how quiet it actually was. It was depressing to see. I couldn't believe my eyes. You know, I thought Manchester was bad, but no. You know, Tom's going to be fine because you know, has a great reputation. People are going to travel, but those you know, high street restaurants are going to find it very tough in the city centres.
I think it's, like I say, it's the city centres are very difficult. So Marlow, we're quite lucky. You know, the Hand of Flowers has developed over 16 years a reputation and a huge foundation and a following that the phone still rings even now for people looking at booking 6 months' time. You know, we're quite lucky that there's still a small energy around that space. However, you know, and I've also got, my best friend has a restaurant down in Padstow, so and you know, I know that the numbers over summer were very, very good for him, and he also thinks that this coming summer should be pretty buoyant in terms of nobody travelling. But like Sacha says, you know, we also have a restaurant in the centre of Manchester and one in the centre of London, and those are the ones that I fear will be the hardest to refill, the hardest to get that energy back. Because the weekends I know will be fine. Manchester weekend is great, but there's always the energy, there's always the excitement, and London as well. But it's that Monday to Thursday period where people are working from home, people are not coming into town as much. The travel and tourism isn't there. You know, football fans for Manchester isn't there. There's a lot of footfall that isn't there. Those city centre restaurants, you know, whether it's Birmingham, whether it's down in Exeter, whether it's, you know, wherever it is, Liverpool, you know, it's getting those people back into that space and that habit of being out into those spaces and those restaurants. So, yeah, I mean, I've got an eye on kind of all over the country. I mean, we've got food and music festivals that we run, so I understand Sacha's point of view as well. I mean, that's completely shut down. So, you know, in terms of the broader scope of hospitality, I have got a feeling, or kind of fingers in lots of pies all over the place, but it is the city centre restaurants that we fear that that's where we're going to have to do the most work to get that energy going, to get that messaging out there.
Actually, it's the city centre venues that have got the highest fixed costs, so they are particularly acutely hit by the rent issue and the rent moratorium. There's most of the central London restaurants, pubs, bars that are leasehold have got a year's debt because they simply can't afford to do anything, and the potential of very high business rates. So it's vital we've got that business rates holiday extended as well to be able to let them cope and try. But it's going to take a long period of time. And if you look at somewhere like London, where 70% of spend is from international tourists in sort of pubs, bars, restaurants and hotels, then it's going to take a long time to recover that, because you're not going to get international travel back for the longest period of time, as well as the commuters, the cultural activities that Tom was talking about, and people's habits. You know, London, people have not been going into the centre of London for over a year. It started this time last year was when it started hitting. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild those habits. You know, 6 weeks to make a new habit. We're going to have a lot longer than that.
It's interesting. I mean, I was on a call last week, an international call, Australia, New Zealand, that obviously in a very different place than us, and they reiterated exactly as Tom, Sacha and Kate have said. It's people have had 12 months of us building a proposition around them being able to live from home. We now need to work to re-engage, and part of that economic stimulus, the 5% VAT, etc., and many of the other things that we put forward are key to getting people out, getting consumer confidence and getting them up in the high street and engaged. And it's going to take a big push. There's no two ways about it. And that was reiterated definitely by Australia and New Zealand. And although we've seen the likes of festivals in New Zealand, which have been, amazing to see people coming back, they haven't highlighted, which were highlighted on the call, the challenges they've had getting people back into the high streets and re-engaging in hospitality. So there is still a lot of work to do. And part of the budget and the roadmap is about giving people consumer confidence, the vaccination rollout, and the correlation and understanding when businesses are going to re-engage, not only for staff, consumer and businesses. It's vital. And we need that run. We need that really clear, precise long-term strategy so that we can plan appropriately, engage and communicate, which are the big things that we need to do to just get out of this situation as quickly or as efficiently as possible.
And also, crucially, we're going to have all of our stakeholders, local, national, regional leaders, industry leaders, singing from the same hymn sheet and with that same confident outlook to be able to do that. Otherwise, it just undermines the messaging that we've got about getting people back, whether that's about using public transport, which is critical in London, where we didn't get that properly communicated in the summer, or whether that's just about appropriateness of return to the office, let alone sort of international travel and tourism. So we really need a big marketing push. And the other element I think that we can do as an industry, and where we can play a part in the solution, if we get hospitality reopened, we get almost 3 million people back into work. We can then start that flow of lateral flow tests, which are going to be critical to reopening some of our nighttime economy, large concerts, etc. Lateral flow tests are going to be part and parcel of what we do. And it's not going to be vaccine passports. It's going to be lateral flow tests, which the workforce are going to be tested. They're trialing it in food manufacturing and in retail at the moment. And it's seen as a way of keeping track of those infection levels, allowing us to reopen safely and clamping down. So if you get hospitality moving again, you can get those big volumes of tests going through, particularly for younger people.
Okay.
I think this sort of, do you know what? Every time you speak, I interrupt.
It's okay. It's difficult to figure it out.
I think there's something that I'm really hoping the government have clocked, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've not. You know, all of us create these safe, secure environments. You know, I don't have to preach, you know, everybody's seen it. If we have the weather like we did in lockdown 1, like last year, do you remember that amazing sunshine when we all sat outside, 6 o'clock, we closed our laptops, we all put a stone on because we started drinking wine. Now, if that happens again, just purely from the people I know who I speak to, they found this lockdown very, very difficult, really hard. And the second that hot weather starts, I know they're not supposed to do, but people are going to start mixing, whether it's in the gardens, whether it's house parties. I'm predicting there's going to be an explosion of illegal raves during the summer. I'm very confident about that. You know, so that's why they now need to move, and they can't afford to wait until May or to the end of April. They have to bring it forward so that we can put the people in these safe environments. Otherwise, it's going to be a free-for-all.
Well, what I was going to say is there's a lot of people asking what your kind of predictions are for dining or drinking indoors, because we've, you know, outdoors is different, but I assume that all of yours would be pretty different answers because you're in completely different sectors. So Michael, what about you? What are you thinking in terms of reopening?
Obviously, we represent a very much a late night sector. I think it's a given that most of us understand that we're going to be sort of one of the last to re-engage. I would like to think that we can start to engage in pilot schemes moving into the sort of early part of the summer for re-engagement towards the end of the summer. But as you can appreciate with everything, we want to move as quickly as possible. Many people are frustrated, they're overburdened with debt, etc. So the challenge we have is presenting, or I think I'll draw it back to this: the correlation between the rollout of vaccination and when we can open the doors is going to depend on whether we go after a rapid testing position to re-engage, or whether we look and decide to push for support instead to actually be able to re-engage the marketplace. The challenge that we've got with all of this is a lot of it hinges on these 2 dates, which we're all sort of waiting for with bated breath. The 22nd is going to have a considerable impact in the direction that people are going to go. And similarly, the 3rd of March is going to have a very real impact on which direction people are going to travel, you know, whether you're making redundancies or whether you're going to continue to hold fire until you're going to be able to re-engage. But the challenge that we have is we need absolute understanding of what the government's planning, not a 4 weeks down the line and then we'll see. That's no good for anybody. We need a long-term strategy similar to the Southern Hemisphere countries that did it very clearly. They recognized the stop-start scenario was not working for many industries. They drew back, they put a long-term strategy in place. It was robust. Some of it was quite draconian, but the fact of the matter is everyone knew where they were. They knew what the communication points, and they could plan for it. And then they got the relevant support. What we've got at the moment is a bit meal position of support and understanding which direction we're going. The stop-start is killing the industry. you know, it's a death by 1,000 cuts in many respects. So it's got to be dealt with as a long-term strategy, very clear, with a clear narrative involving everyone that, you know, and particularly the hardest hits, because they're the ones that need the strongest communication. So I'm hoping that we're going to get up and going. And you know, for me, April, May has got to be a period where we've got to engage, particularly with the hospitality sector. The late night sector has obviously got to be slightly later than that. But there are so many misconceptions about our industry that we're fighting at the moment of what we can do and what we can't do and what they mean. I mean, it's very different than a Soho sort of nightclub compared to a large space that is potentially compared to an outdoor event. So I just think there just needs to be some real understanding of what these businesses look like and what they can actually do, because we are amazing at planning and dealing with people, but it just doesn't seem to be getting through to government at the moment.
Tom, have you got a date that you're working to in your mind for indoor dining, or is that just something you don't really want to think about just yet? So
no, well, I mean, yeah, we're obviously working towards a kind of a timescale. Originally, I was working towards end of April, beginning of May. Then they've started leaking out tiny little stories that impress through certain voices, and a friend of a friend said this, that might be happening there and there. I mean, you know, about it coming earlier into April, but I very much doubt to see any form of indoor dining or restaurants until really the beginning of May. I mean, that's what we're working towards. Also, because it just doesn't work. It's not profitable. You know, putting a huge amount of restrictions and being able to open outside, I mean, that's actually not a positive. It was being spun this weekend as it's all a positive news. If you're all good and you all behave yourselves, you'll all be able to have a drink outside. Well, that's quite good to a consumer point of view, thinking that they can. But from an industry, from a business point of view, it doesn't mean that it operates as a profit. In fact, removing some of those support systems, furlough schemes, and just saying that now you can open outside means you can open, actually will cause more problems, more debt, more business closures than it's more of a negative than a positive. So I don't think, from a restaurant point of view, from a food-led business point of view, I can't see us opening anything really until the beginning of May. I mean, it's just, I don't see it being profitable. I don't see it being, not even profitable, ability to break even. So from that point of view, I don't see many places open until that sort of time scale.
A point I'm picking up from all of you is obviously clarity, which would be lovely, wouldn't it, to have some of that. So let's talk about the roadmap and how important that is. Kate, I know you've said that you'd like to see the VAT extension for the next 12 months, business rates for this year and 2022, furlough until June, and then obviously an extension on the repayment period for government-backed loans. Is there anything else that you're hoping to see from this roadmap when we, you know, hopefully government stands up and gives us some of this clarity that we're all after?
Well, I guess all of those are budget. So those are the 3rd of March, and that helps to inform any of the business decisions around reopening. What I want to see from the roadmap is a clear indication. I guess dates are less important than the conditions under which you are opening, and the phasing and sequencing and how long things last. Because, you know, if somebody was to say you can only open under these really strict conditions, or it's a month later and it's less conditions and fewer conditions, I should say, then it's a different question. So you need to know, what are the restrictions? Are they any worse than they were in July? Because those were really tight and we didn't get to break even. How long are they going to be in place? And it's equally important to have that end date. So I want to see those 3 elements, a date when we can reopen, that it's safe to be able to do so, ideally flag it towards and tie it towards the vaccination program and the vaccination rollout, because if we've got the most vulnerable people in society protected, if we've got the people vaccinated who account for 99% of all deaths, why are we keeping such tight restrictions in place for a moment longer than they need to be? So I want to see that sort of opening date indicative, and then I want to see an end date, and I want to understand how they're phasing it out throughout that, and whether that is allowing more parts of hospitality to reopen as we go through, or whether that is tapering off some of those restrictions. But that's what we need from the route map, because at the moment, without any dates, without any conditions, You can't put anything into business plans. You cannot forward plan. You are still hand to mouth. You can't go and say anything to banks or investors or your landlords to be able to reach agreements on those elements. And while you've still got this open-ended point that you could be in restrictions or have some restrictions in place until the autumn, you have to factor into that business plan that you might be fully closed. You might not be allowed to open at all, and you might not be able to make a profit. That just means that more and more of our businesses will just fail. We are creating the conditions for insolvency. So the government needs to end all of that uncertainty as quickly as possible.
Okay, and how hopeful are you that you're going to get these dates?
I'm not terribly hopeful that we're going to get. I mean, you know, what business needs is something that says, we think by Easter you could have this, by the 8th of May you could have this, by June everything will be off. But I don't think we're going to get that. Certainly not from what was said by the Prime Minister today or over the weekend, certainly not from some of the comments from cabinet ministers. I don't think we're going to get that clarity and certainty, but that's what business needs, and that's what business needs in order to be able to plan. Now, they might be moved, we all understand that you could have that set out, and you might have to say, I'm really sorry, I know I said that's what we were aiming for, but the cases are high, or the vaccination's gone awry, or something bizarre's happened, but this is what you're planning towards. Otherwise, how do you restock? I mean, we haven't even talked about our supply chains, but, you know, our supply chains are also shattered and fragile, particularly food supply chains that are having to grapple with Brexit as well. How do you restock and stand up those supply chains on a women with a wish and a prayer when it's happened before and we've had to close down again? So, you know, there's no confidence across the whole of the sector that we can do it. You need to build that confidence by giving people time to plan and a degree of certainty. But I'm not confident that we're going to get what I've just outlined on the 22nd of February.
I think this is the issue, isn't it? This is it's the roadmap, and I think the panel all probably feel the same thing, is that ultimately we all want the same thing from the budget, we all want the same roadmap. I mean, I'm hearing that actually they're going to set out the criteria for us to open, i.e. basically we want to see vaccines at X and R rate at Y, and then basically once that happens we'll give you a date. But yeah, I mean, I think Kate's completely right. The supply chain thing is just mental. I mean, I've got suppliers I was speaking to yesterday. I mean, you know, we haven't got into suppliers, and we probably should talk about it a little bit. But you know, wrote off £10,000 worth of stock, you know, just yesterday because he doesn't know what's going on, and ultimately he's buying in, and then, you know, and this is the whole thing that came around with the Eat Out to Help Out as well. I mean, you had supply chains going in July, going from having basically nothing to having to ramp up to like full speed really, really quickly, and then put everyone back onto furlough. And it's the same thing. It's this roadmap piece, and I can't see why the government don't understand that we just need some time to plan. I can't understand why they can't see that. We all were shouting about the same thing. We're all saying the same thing. We just want to know a date. I just want to know a date in a couple of months in advance.
The sad bit about it is, and I'll, you know, I've witnessed Kate in meetings, myself, Sacha, everyone saying the same thing in terms of planning. The challenge that you have, and I'll be honest with you, the confidence has been lost since the announcement that was coming on the 22nd. We said that the PM said he would give us dates and very clear understanding of what that narrative looked like and who was going to be able to open and when. And now within the last week, it's been watered down again of a very short-term stint of understanding what's going to happen in the immediate future. And then there are some tranches or caveats around hospitalization, mortality, vaccination rollout, etc. So it's a constantly changing narrative. And we need desperately this long-term strategy that's going to give us, even if it's a yellow brick road, you know, a direction of travel. I mean, we can call it a yellow brick road these days because, you know, I'm sure the direction of travel, it's very difficult, and it's difficult to digest for businesses. What do you tell your staff? What do you tell your suppliers? What do you tell your debtors? You know, it's very, very difficult to regain confidence in an ever-changing environment, and it's got to be addressed. And I appreciate the government are trying to be all-encompassing, but it's not working. And it's causing more issue, both a human issue in terms of well-being, particularly business owners, that are going through the mill, ones that aren't as lucky or in a prominent financial position or have overstretched themselves at the wrong time and then come into this position is very, very difficult. And there has to be some human considerations here because, you know, for some of the businesses, particularly some of the bigger businesses that, you know, we represent, a year down the line. I mean, we were sat here in March last year saying, oh, we're going to be back in 3 months. We're now sat here a year later talking about whether we're actually going to be back in 3 months again. It's like Groundhog Day to a point, you know, so very, very difficult for people to stomach. And I think although the virus has touched more people and people are very well aware of the danger of this virus and the issues around it, we're also got to consider that we've got a huge economic issue that's coming in the next month or two if it's not addressed, particularly within our sector, because we're going to lose a huge part of a cultural institution in pubs and restaurants and nightclubs and all the things that have been huge for us and globally renowned. So.
Well, I just want to, and I think my last point before we finish is just come back to the VAT and just reiterate exactly what does it mean to the sector if this doesn't get extended? What are the worst case scenarios of this if people don't shout about it, you know, and government doesn't listen? What is going to happen to hospitality?
Well, for starters, you just see 15% price increases. You know, I mean, the biggest thing about the VAT is we don't know where we're going to be. And for me, basically, we like to trade, you know, where we don't want to have handouts. And I think the 5% VAT is really, really important because it means we're trading, okay, we're paying less tax, but I've had price increases of 9%, which I haven't passed on to the customer. So the biggest piece is the prices are going to go up. They can't not go up. If we go back to 20% VAT, prices are going to go up, and we don't want to do that. We really don't want to do that. That is like the worst possible scenario is opening up and putting up our prices by 15%. And also, I mean, for me, I've got decisions that I want to make on the restaurants and on various different projects that we're working on. We can't make that until we know what the VAT is doing.
I think from a macro perspective, and I'd echo what Andy said, but just if we put it in a macro perspective, in October, as we went into second lockdown, we had a third of hospitality premises that had not reopened since March. And we had 1 million people who were still on full furlough and had not returned to work since March. Those are the quantum of the jeopardy that we've got unless we get this right. Those are the ones that are most at risk, and that's what we could be looking at. And if we get the support with VAT and business rates, and I think the two do need to go hand in hand, it will bring forward hospitality's recovery and therefore the economic recovery by 9 months. We will recover 9 months more quickly than we would do without that support. It's a very long, slow road to recovery, and those jobs and those businesses will be lost along the way, and we will have a much diminished industry that comes back. If we get it right and we bring forward that recovery 9 months, then we will do for the country what we did out of the financial crash. £10 billion a year invested in our high streets, 1 in 6 of net new jobs created in all parts of the country at all skill levels. And also we will go back to growing at 5% year on year. We will help to repair the damage that's been done by the pandemic, but we can't do it if we're at half strength.
Anything else that anyone would like to add before I bring this to a close? No? Are you sure? Okay, right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. I mean, I've had loads and loads of questions, but there's only so many that I can ask. So if there are any that I particularly want an answer to, I will get in touch with you myself. But I'm sure that if anyone wants to send you a message on social media to ask those questions specifically, you'd be happy to answer them anyway. So yes, thank you all very much. Fingers crossed for the 22nd that we get those dates that you're talking about, Kate. That would be amazing. And obviously the 3rd of March, we'll see what they throw at us then. But thank you all, and I will speak to you all soon.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.